You're seeing furloughed workers across America today. You're seeing troops not getting their pay, Border Patrol not getting their pay, law enforcement, national parks. I can go on and on and on. This is totally pointless and needless. Senate Democrats did this. Senate Democrats are the ones who can stop this, and that's at noon today.
Peter Ducey is live on Capitol Hill. Peter, I imagine there's a bit of tension there.
A lot of tension, Melissa, and Democrats are now saying that it is no longer enough for Mitch McConnell to say that he hopes or intends to bring a DACA bill to the floor in early February once this 3-week-long CR passes, if it ever passes. They are saying that from McConnell, they want a guarantee that it will come to the floor.
All they're wanting is a guarantee that there will be a process, because you're going to deport a lot of children who don't have any other home but America. So there's a sympathy, I think, on Democrats and Republicans.
This morning, Republican Senator Susan Collins hosted a bipartisan group of senators in her office for a shutdown negotiation, and once it wrapped, she said that Democrats who want McConnell to promise a DACA vote in 3 weeks are onto something.
I do think it would be helpful if the language were a little bit stronger, because the level of tension is so high. But you have to remember that initially the majority leader was not talking about this issue. So he has moved, the Republican leader has moved to accommodate the concerns that have been raised.
The next step today comes an hour from right now, a procedural vote that needs 60 senators voting yes in order to advance a 3-week budget.
You have a vote today, one way or the other.
But is it
It comes up. I certainly hope it does. Obviously the conversations between leaders continue, but this is an opportunity for us again to do the right thing by the American people and get out of what is a ridiculous shutdown. So the majority of the votes are there. More than 50 votes are there to fund the government, and it just needs to happen today. Cooler heads need to prevail, and I hope that this is what happens.
But there is not much confidence that the 60 votes are there yet. In fact, Democratic Florida Senator Bill Nelson says he's not sure the vote will happen at all. And Democratic Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar just told us this.
There's just widespread support for that, and I think this group, hopefully we can resolve this in the next day or two, but this group's importance is not going to end there, because we're going to, as we move forward with the DREAM Act, we're going to need a group of Democrats and Republicans, some version of the DREAM Act.
And so this is the scene just about everywhere that you go in the Senate office buildings. That's Senator John Kennedy. Every lawmaker that reporters see in the hallway, they just swarm around because there is so much that could happen an hour from right now. And nobody on either side of the aisle is saying that they are happy the government is shut down. But nobody's really given up any ground yet either. Melissa?
Peter, thank you.
Another big story this morning, new evidence of possible political bias inside the FBI. Lawmakers now receiving a new trove of text messages sent between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Strzok was removed from the Russia investigation for sending anti-Trump messages to Page, who was then his mistress. In the newly released exchange, they write, "Timing looks like hell." Yeah, that is awful timing, Lisa Page agrees. In a later message, Page says, "It's a real profile in courage since she knows no charges will be brought." All this apparently in reference to then Attorney General Loretta Lynch's private meeting with Bill Clinton back in 2016 and their knowledge that Hillary Clinton would not be charged in the email investigation. Joining us now is Bill McGurn, Main Street columnist for the Wall Street Journal and former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush. The timing of all of this is, at the very least, suspicious because James Comey had not come out yet and said that Hillary Clinton would not be charged.
Right, although he had drafted a statement, right, earlier that she would not be charged before she'd even been interviewed. Look, John, it's just the latest piece of evidence that we need to know more about what the FBI was doing. Agents are entitled to have their own opinions and strong opinions, but the text messages back and forth between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page suggest they knew that what they were doing was improper. There's several references to we shouldn't be doing this over our work phones and so forth. And some of their messages, like that one, kind of contradict the official line that's out there. So people need to know, was this an honest inquiry?
There is also the fact that 5 months worth of their messages have turned up missing.
Yeah, the John Koskinen kind of experience, at the IRS, when he said things were missing and then it turns out that they were going missing even under his rule. I mean, I think in normal times you might be able to give some credence to this. In government, it's a pretty fair rule that stupidity and ineptitude is more telling than sort of criminal intent. But it's very, very convenient that these things are missing. And I think Congress needs to get to the bottom of that, too, have a report to make sure that the FBI is actually telling the truth on this.
And we should point out, you're not an anti-FBI crusader. You have a soft spot in your heart for that agency.
It's sort of the family business. My dad was an FBI agent, very proud of it. I'm very proud of my dad's service. He has nothing to do with my coverage. And there are a lot of good FBI agents out there. I would say the majority of them are good, but the leadership, there are questions. Look, the FBI was investigating both presidential campaigns, and there are questions about what it did on both. Right now, there's a memo sitting in Congress containing classified information, mostly about the FBI seeking of a warrant on members of the Trump campaign team. And the question is, were they honest in that? I haven't seen the memo, but several people have come on TV and said it's very disturbing what the FBI and Justice were saying.
Worse than Watergate kind of stuff, according to some members of Congress.
If it's true that they weaponized law enforcement and opposition research to go after a political candidate of another party, that's pretty terrible.
Right, because you're talking about this anti-Trump dossier compiled by Fusion GPS using money apparently from the Clinton campaign. And the question that we still apparently don't know the answer to is, did the FBI rely on that document, that dossier, to go to a FISA court and say, we need to spy on American citizens?
I'd go even further. Was it true? I mean, what I want to know is whether it's true or not. So whether the FBI fudged in its application. I mean, if Mrs. Clinton turned up evidence that was true, I mean, it's hard to complain about that. The question is whether they used all these kind of flimsy disinformation things, put it all together, and in an effort to cast a cloud at least as long as the election.
And you also have an interesting chain of questions about what happened in the Hillary Clinton email investigation, beginning with the fact that there were no grand jury
Well, as that message you talked about, there's reluctance to go to the grand jury. It looks like the fix was in from the Justice Department. Now, in fairness, Mr. Comey wasn't in charge of making those decisions, like on immunity or, as you mentioned, the grand jury. But he could have stood up and said, I'm not going to preside over an investigation that's not true, and resigned. I think that would have been a very honorable way to exit.
It is one of the big stories out there right now. A lot of it's kind of getting swallowed up by the government shutdown. But
a lot of people don't want to know. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Interesting column in the Wall Street Journal. Bill McGurn is the author. Bill, thanks for being here.
Thank you, John.
Melissa.
New concerns by the TSA that terrorists will try to plant a bomb on a U.S.-bound flight, prompting stricter guidelines for cargo on flights from 5 mostly Muslim nations. Doug McElway is live now in Washington with the details. Doug.
Hi, Melissa. The Transportation Security Administration claims that this change in policy is driven by recent intelligence. It enhances some earlier changes that were made when U.S. intelligence officials learned that ISIS was capable of hiding effective explosive devices inside personal electronic devices like laptops. The new policy takes effect today, and it concerns all cargo loaded onto flights headed directly to the U.S. from airports in 5 countries where terrorists have been very active against aviation. We're talking about Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. All cargo presently undergoes screening, but the new measures now require air carriers to divulge who is sending the package, where it was sent from, what's in it, and where the package may have made stops before it was placed on the final U.S.-bound flight. That information gives TSA and customs officials some added tools to identify potential explosives. For example, one official told CBS News that if somebody is spending $500 to ship a $100 printer that's easily purchased in the United States, it should raise some instant suspicion. Egypt Air, Royal Jordanian, Qatar, Saudi, Emirates and Etihad Airlines already serve the U.S. from those 5 countries. They will now all be required to comply with this new order. Recall back in February of 2016, a Somali air carrier, Diallo Airlines, managed to land successfully after a laptop bomb blew up after takeoff. That bomb had passed through an X-ray machine. The blast left a gaping hole in the Airbus A321 and it sucked the bomber out of the plane. His body was later discovered on the ground. Forewarning of what could possibly be to come. Melissa.
Yeah, those just seem like common sense rules. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Doug McElway.
An explosion rocks a shopping mall. What police say caused it. The latest on this investigation. Plus, we are live on Capitol Hill awaiting action to end the government shutdown with the blame game in full swing. What lawmakers need to do so the government can fully reopen.
I think if people can get realistic, we can make a lot of progress very quickly. But it cannot be a product of a gang of 4 or 5 people meeting somewhere, putting a bill on the floor and saying, take it or leave it.
It's very concerning when you think about it. I mean, it's people here shopping, just enjoying a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening with their family, and literally, boom. That somebody would do that. Thankfully, it was in an area where there were not customers.
Police also found a book bag containing what they believed were other devices, and witnesses have described someone now considered a person of interest in the case.
Democrats agree with everything that's in the bill. It's just that they want to use that hostage in order to get an agreement on the deferred action on childhood arrivals, or DACA.
While lawmakers on both sides point the finger at one another for the ongoing government shutdown, the media are struggling to report on the political blame game. This after Democrats and some Republicans rejected short-term spending bill that did not include protection for the so-called dreamers. Let's bring in our panel. Ellen Ratner is bureau chief at Talk Media News. Judy Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and author, both are Fox News contributors. Is it fair to say that the DACA situation is the primary driver behind this government shutdown?
I think it is. I think that the Democrats are now demanding it. However, I happen to have been in the chamber in 2010, December, when 5 Democrats voted against DACA. So, they are using it for political purposes, no question.
All right. And Judy, what about the coverage? Is that fact coming to the fore?
I think the most interesting thing, John, is that no single narrative has emerged. I mean, if you're a conservative publication, you tend to blame the Democrats. And if you're a liberal publication, you tend to blame Republicans and Donald Trump above all, because after all, he's the decider. He was going to make the government run on time. He was going to get all these deals done. But what's interesting is on Friday, the New York Times sent out a headline that basically said Senate Democrats block the short-term spending bill, and all hell broke loose because all of a sudden
the magnifying glass is on them.
Right, absolutely, because they are doing basically what the Republicans did in 2013, which is a single issue has become so overly important that it's blocking the business of government. That's going to be harder and harder to sell, even though Donald Trump is keeping the lowest profile in the world.
Well, except for the fact that he did, in fact, say that he would sign something when the Democrats and Republicans agreed on something, and then he refused to sign.
And then he changed, exactly. Because he's being held hostage, if you believe Jonah Goldberg and other people, neoconservatives. He's being held hostage by Steve Miller and his chief of staff, John Kelly. So they want a hard line on immigration. They say that the base will simply not tolerate any compromise on this, even though Donald Trump himself has said several times that he wants to sign the, quote, Bill of Love to protect the DACA.
Right, but I don't think that the papers have accurately covered it.
Well, I think that's true.
Here's what Politico, which is the widely read political website, said. It says, usually when the government shuts down, a clear media narrative quickly takes hold. One party is driving the action and therefore is held responsible. But like so much else in the Trump era, this current shutdown is unprecedented. No single storyline has emerged, causing Democrats and Republicans to scramble for advantage and members of both sides to cry foul over coverage. It sounds like you agree with that, although for the New York Times to sort of point the finger at Democrats, that changed some minds.
Well, they backed off because in today's paper, the New York Times had an analysis piece masquerading as news, saying that basically the president was doing what Steve Bannon and John Kelly told him he had to do. That was the right next to the lead of the paper. There's another column that put forth that thesis. So,
but in his, in his news conference on, I think it was Friday, Paul Ryan seemed mystified as to why Democrats were not going along with the continuing resolution. They were objecting to, he said, a bill, the contents of which they didn't object to, and the suggestion on his part was that because it didn't deal with the DACA situation, Democrats were not going to go along with it.
Well, the point is just like I said that I had been in the chamber in 2010, the papers have not covered this DACA debate and where all sides have been on this. And I fault the news media for not doing more in-depth on that.
Except that the DACA issue itself supposedly has bipartisan support. Now, the Democrats don't trust the Republicans to bring it up after they vote for a short-term spending measure, which is why we're in this kind of gap. There's a huge trust gap.
That's the leverage that they're using right now.
That's the leverage they're using. That can backfire if people decide they want the government to function more than they want to protect the DACA kids.
All right. Final thought, Ellen.
Well, my final thought is I wish the press would do more about the history of all of the DACA as well as this whole shutdown issue.
Well, there's a long history there. Let's put it that way. Ellen Ratner, Judy Miller, thank you both.
Thank you, John.
Melissa.
A week after that harrowing discovery in a Southern California home, detectives are widening their investigation. What they're now saying about the home where 13 children were held captive. Plus, Vice President Mike Pence with new remarks on the controversial decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, how soon the U.S. will open its embassy there.
I am here to convey a simple message from the heart of the American people. America.
Right now, new details on the California House of Horrors. Detectives reportedly planning to use cadaver dogs to search every home where David and Louise Turpin ever lived.
Senate that was slated
over fears that there may be children who died in their care. According to reports, investigators are also considering using DNA tests to confirm whether all 13 children are related and were born to the couple. Authorities were made aware of the children last week when a 17-year-old girl escaped and called police. They were described as starving and emaciated and living in filthy conditions. The Turpins were arraigned Thursday on multiple charges of torture, child abuse, and false imprisonment.
Just in on the vice president's trip to Israel, about 2 hours from now, he will make a joint statement with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after Mr. Pence announced the Israeli parliament on the Iran nuclear deal, Mideast peace, and the timetable for opening the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. David Lee Miller live in Jerusalem right now. David Lee.
John, this was an historic day. Vice President Mike Pence became the first U.S. VP to speak before Israel's parliament, the Knesset. He was interrupted numerous times for applause and once by Arab members of the parliament who held up signs declaring Jerusalem is the capital of Palestine. The protesting Arab lawmakers were removed by force from the chamber at the beginning of Mr. Pence's speech. The vice president reaffirmed the special relationship between Israel and the United States. He received a standing ovation when he revealed the details of when the U.S. embassy would be relocated from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Israel's capital.
In the weeks ahead, our administration will advance its plan to open the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. And that United States Embassy will open before the end of next year.
The vice president spoke at length about Iran, a country that has pledged itself to Israel's destruction. Mr. Pence said the U.S. will never allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon and called the agreement with Iran negotiated by the Obama administration a disaster.
Unless the Iran nuclear deal is fixed, President Trump has said the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal immediately.
Palestinian leaders are boycotting the vice president's visit, citing the U.S. position on Jerusalem. The chief Palestinian negotiator said, and I quote, "The messianic discourse of Pence is a gift to extremists," adding that the United States is part of the problem, not the solution. John.
David Lee Miller keeping an eye on that very tense part of the world for us from Jerusalem. Thank you.
A top White House official says the government shutdown is taking a toll on the president's relations with Democrats. Our political panel weighs in on what impact that could have going forward. Plus, the administration has been very vocal throughout the shutdown. A live report with the latest reaction from the White House next.
I can tell you that the direction from the very top from the president is for each cabinet secretary to do everything possible to keep as much of the government open as possible. This will be a different.
Fox News alert, your government is still officially closed, but things are swirling in Washington. The big box on your screen left there shows the U.S. Senate, where they are about to hold a procedural vote, kind of a test vote, really, to see if they can get the 60 votes that would then allow them to reopen the government. That's not absolutely a sure thing, but it's what they are working with right now. The White House is accusing Democrats of playing politics with military pay in the meantime. Here is White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders a short time ago.
We're still hopeful that the Democrats will quit holding our military families, vulnerable children across this country hostage, pass a funding bill so we can move forward and have the conversation they want to have. Look, there is legislation on the floor that they don't disagree with. It's absolutely mind-boggling that they can't figure out how to vote yes.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts live with more. John.
Hey, John, good morning to you. I don't want to say that things are moving, but we're getting some indications out of a Senate Democrat caucus meeting right now that there may be a little bit of movement. I talked to the White House Legislative Office just a short time ago. They are waiting for the outcome of that meeting to see where they are right now, to see if maybe there may be a favorable vote to reopen the government. Certainly, the president is trying to put the pressure on in whatever way he can, retweeting this morning something that he set out over the weekend, encouraging Senate Republicans to invoke the so-called nuclear option, requiring a simple majority to pass things. If there is no yes vote in the Senate, the president tweeting, quote, "Great to see how hard Republicans are fighting for our military and safety at the border. The Dems just want illegal immigrants to pour into our nation unchecked. If stalemate continues, Republicans should go to 51% nuclear option and vote on real long-term budget, no CRs," the president adding in his new tweet, "end the Democrats' obstruction." While there are indications, and again, these are all indications, that the Democrats may be coming around, about 90 minutes ago, the White House Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short seemed fairly pessimistic about the possibility of getting 60 votes to reopen government. Listen here.
Right now, it looks like we're still a few votes short. I think that Republicans have continued to unite. There's been a few red state moderate Democrats who have flipped over and recognized the absurdity of the Democrat position of holding 320 million tax-paying, law-abiding citizens hostage to try to resolve a plan for 690,000 illegal residents. So I think that that pressure is building, but I'm not sure we'll quite get to 60 today.
Short also saying he does not understand why the Democrats are shutting down the government over DACA when there has been progress in negotiations over DACA. Short told me a short while ago, no pun intended, that the Democrats are beginning to offer some money toward building a wall, and the White House is amenable to increasing the number of dreamers who would be covered by a DACA fix. The number right now is at 690,000. The White House acknowledging there may be thousands more than that. Sarah Sanders, who is the mother of a 2-year-old who managed to order a Batman from Amazon by yelling into his Alexa recently, had a rather stark assessment of where the Democrats are on this point. Listen here.
He came to office on immigration.
It doesn't seem like it
no
takes a rocket scientist to figure it out. They're throwing a 2-year-old temper tantrum. Hopefully they'll get over that and we can move on and start having that conversation on immigration reform after they reopen the government.
So hanging in the balance today, the president's planned trip to Davos, Switzerland. It's on hold for now. If the government were to remain shut down, it's likely that the president would have to cancel that trip. We will know where all of that stands, John, after we find out what's going to happen in the Senate sometime in the next 90 minutes to a couple of hours.
We had a video up there of Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa. She is one of those who has been voting in favor of keeping the government open. These are live pictures of Senator Ernst there on the Senate floor. So things are percolating again in the U.S. Senate. We'll see where it goes from here. Our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. Thank you.
And now new White House reaction on the government shutdown. Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short says President Trump's relationship with top Democrats is, quote, probably deteriorating. This as Kellyanne Conway is taking veiled shots at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer after the administration claims that Schumer mischaracterized their talks about funding the border wall.
This president is always willing to negotiate with people who come in good faith, but people have to stop thinking that they heard what they wanted to hear rather than what they needed to hear in different settings.
Joining now is Richard Fowler, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor, and Lawrence Jones, radio host of The Lawrence Jones Show. He's a conservative commentator. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Good to be here. Thanks, Melissa.
Richard, isn't it true that in this climate, if they get back to work, it would be very difficult not to move forward on DACA, given how much pressure there has been? If they do promise we're going to open the government and then we're going to resume talks, it would be tough to go back on that.
That's an interesting question. I think that's still a question that's up for debate if you talk to Senate Democrats, because President Trump a couple months ago promised a DACA deal. And Melissa, we're still waiting on it, and that's why the government shut down today. But this goes far beyond that. I think what Donald Trump promised, that he'd bring this country together. He promised to be a deal maker. And what we saw this weekend from the president was him sitting on his hands. He didn't bring members to the White House. He didn't try to iron out a deal. He didn't try to work with Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats and House Republicans and House Democrats. He just sat at the White House and he continued to tweet and did not lead. And that's problematic.
So, Lawrence, so that is the picture that Democrats are trying to paint. The flip side of that is you have Vice President Mike Pence standing in front of troops and saying that Democrats are getting paid on Capitol Hill while you guys are out here risking your lives and serving your country without a paycheck. A civics lesson will tell you it takes 60 votes in the Senate, and that is what is missing. Is that narrative winning?
It's winning because it's the reality of what's going on, Melissa. Look, Donald Trump made a promise, and it was to put Americans first. We're having a debate over non-Americans. That's just the reality of the debate. Now, the president already said that he wanted to get to a DACA deal. This is a totally separate issue, and I know it's political, but honestly, Melissa, I don't understand the Democrats' win on this. I mean, if they were saying, let's shut down the government over Planned Parenthood because women issues is important to our platform, then that's one thing. If they would have said, hey, we're going to shut down the issues because of, a lot of things happen to black folks in Chicago or something like that because black folks vote for them 90% of the time, then maybe there would be something politically that they can gain from. But they literally gain nothing from this. They just look like complete idiots on Capitol Hill because you have people in our military that won't get paid over them shutting down the government over non-citizens.
Okay.
And if they want to go to the midterms with that, then go for it.
The reality of the situation is that there are a lot of problems that have piled up that the government hasn't dealt with for quite a long time. DACA is definitely one of them. I mean, they really need to get back to work and actually solve problems instead of playing politics, no?
I agree with you, Melissa, 100%. Sadly, what we've seen over the past, I would say, 6 to 7 years is the only time Washington gets anything done is when they have these type of deadlines, when they have these time of crises. And that has everything to do with the fact that we have a broken system here. Democrats refuse to work with Republicans. Republicans refuse to work with Democrats. And the picture of this in the dictionary is President Donald Trump. He promised to come to Washington.
Hang on, let him finish.
He has everything to do with running this country. He's the president of the United States, period. And he promised to do the budget. He is the president of the United States, and he has a job to make this government run. And it is his job to get Democrats and Republicans to come to the table. That's what he promised. That's what he ran on. And we're seeing quite the opposite.
Richard,
and if you look at these votes,
let's let Lawrence respond. Go ahead.
Look, I think the American people that are sitting here watching this program took history in high school. They know the roles of Congress. They know that the president is not responsible for the budget. That is Congress' role. And right now we have Democrats, and I can't stress this enough. We're talking about non-citizens. There are a lot of Republicans that are compassionate when it comes to DACA, but when you start putting the DACA recipients before the American people, I guarantee you this is not a message
But
that
let me ask you
Democrats
both.
want
Let
in
me
the
ask you both.
midterm.
Hang on. Let me ask you both, because that's the kind of rhetoric that turns up the temperature on this. And the truth of the matter is that there's something for everyone in this. I mean, there's more border security, which Democrats have been in favor of, and there's a solution on DACA, whatever that is, that Republicans have been in favor of resolving as well. Isn't there a way for everyone to come out looking like a winner still, Richard?
There absolutely is a way. Congressman Louis Gutierrez from Chicago said yesterday he would be willing, and he is a staunch immigration supporter. He's a staunch DACA supporter. He said he'd be willing to compromise on the wall if that means saving these 700 people who came to this country at no fault of their own. And that is progress. Now, let's be very clear. Remember, there are Republicans who voted against this original CR to begin with.
Okay.
And this is a larger problem that we have in this country.
For different reasons.
Okay. There's a larger problem. But Melissa, I think you speak to a larger point. We have a lot of other crises. We have community health centers that haven't been funded. We have CHIP that hasn't been funded. We have immigration that hasn't been funded. And this can't happen unless Democrats and Republicans choose to work together.
Richard is making my point for me. We have a lot of issues, yet Democrats aren't shutting the government down because of that. And those are issues that actually affect the American people, the people that can actually vote for them, that did vote for them. So why are they shutting the government down over this issue?
Okay, all right, we gotta go.
I have one response.
I'm
Republicans
sure we're gonna
are
have
in
another
control
time to fight
of the
about this,
House
guys.
and the Senate and the
Guys.
White House, and they're the ones shutting the government down.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you for your time. Yes. Looking like a winner still, Richard.
There absolutely is a way. Congressman Louis Gutierrez from Chicago said yesterday he would be willing, and he is a staunch immigration supporter. He's a staunch DACA supporter. He said he'd be willing to compromise on the wall if that means saving these 700 people who came to this country at no fault of their own. And that is progress. Now, let's be very clear. Remember, there are Republicans who voted against this original CR to begin with. And this is a larger problem that we have in this country.
For different reasons.
There's a larger problem. But Melissa, I think you speak to a larger point. We have a lot of other crises. We have community health centers that haven't been funded. We have CHIP that hasn't been funded. We have immigration that hasn't been funded. And this can't happen unless Democrats and Republicans choose to work together.
Richard is making my point for me. We have a lot of issues, yet Democrats aren't shutting the government down because of that. And those are issues that actually affect the American people, the people that can actually vote for them, that did vote for them. So why are they shutting the government down over this issue?
Okay, all right, we gotta go.
I have one response.
I'm
Republicans
sure we're gonna
are
have
in
another
control
time to fight
of the
about this,
House
guys.
and the Senate and the White House, and they're the ones shutting the government
well
down.
done. Thank you. Thanks to both of you for your time. Yes.
The government shutdown is causing problems for the Centers for Disease Control during one of the worst flu outbreaks we have seen in years. This is one of the most severe flu seasons we have seen in years. Federal officials say 30 children have died during the flu epidemic that dates back to October. Now the government shutdown is making matters worse for the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. Let's bring in Dr. Ernest Patty, Senior Attending Physician of Emergency Medicine at St. Barnabas Hospital here in New York. The CDC has said it will remain open despite the government shutdown, but some of its facilities are not going to be operating.
Well, it will be running on like a limited basis. You know, we consult with them frequently for certain outbreaks, and they do a lot of surveillance for us.
They're the ones who keep tabs on all of the flu outbreaks around the country, right?
Throughout the country, yes, in conjunction with state health agencies as well.
And we already know that this is one of the worst flu seasons in recent years.
It's definitely one of the bad ones, and it's kicking up. Well, I think the types of strains of flu that are hitting us, the fact that it occurred shortly after the holidays when people are in close contact with each other, visiting, traveling, things of that nature, you're a little run down too during the holidays, so your immune system might be low.
And the flu shot, the vaccination that people have been getting is not necessarily 100% effective.
No, it's not 100% effective. What I've read said up to 30%. But I have to tell you, any bit of immunity is definitely better than no immunity. So it's still not too late to get the flu vaccine. And I've been giving it to my family as well and myself.
Yeah, thankfully here at Fox, we have an immunization program. I got my flu shot. I haven't had to deal with the flu yet.
Excellent.
But now I'm worried because if it isn't all that effective on this particular strain.
Well, there's other things that you can do. The 10 best ways to prevent the flu: wash your hands frequently, hand sanitizers, good hand hygiene, eat a good diet, rest, get some sleep, exercise, and stay hydrated.
And if you are one of those people who's afflicted, don't go to work. Don't go out in a public place.
Exactly. Don't go to work. Cover your cough. Use tissues. If you sneeze into your hand, you have to wash them immediately. And pay attention to being in public places, subways, buses, airports, public bathrooms. You always need to wash your hands appropriately in and out of those places, and before and after you eat.
Good advice. Dr. Ernest Patty, thank you.
Thanks very much for having me, John.
You bet.
Legendary magician Harry Houdini, famous for his daring escapes, leaving behind what may be a royal piece of jewelry. I love it. Coming up, Jamie Colby, host of Strange Inheritance, tells us all about it. Plus, the New England Patriots are kings of the AFC again. The Philadelphia Eagles also making it to the Super Bowl. We will recap the championship games ahead.
My experience with USA.
McConnell to use the nuclear option of a simple majority vote. What would that mean? And who are Americans going to blame for all this?
Plus, newly released text between members of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team suggesting they knew Hillary Clinton would be exonerated in her email probe before the FBI even interviewed her. So how big of a deal is this?
All that plus outnumbered. Our guest in the middle seat, top of the hour. See ya.
New information on a strange inheritance. A California woman was left a jewel-encrusted brooch that once belonged to famed magician Harry Houdini. And she's sharing her story with Jamie Colby, host of Strange Inheritance on the Fox Business Network. Jamie joins us now live with more. I love the sound of this one.
But without the brooch, I couldn't get my hands on it. It actually sold to an anonymous bidder. You will find out tonight who that is. It is a name you know, and it's pretty exciting because we went right to the source. We went to David Copperfield, who is the largest collector in the world of Harry Houdini memorabilia. He's really an expert in this field, and he takes us on a private tour behind the scenes of his personal museum. It's not open to the public, and told us all about this incredible piece. The question, Melissa, is how did Houdini get it? He claimed it was from Tsar Nicholas II. His wife, Bess, gave it to her best girlfriend, a family of magicians. She was a female magician. And now the question is, what do they do with it?
Yeah.
It's priceless.
And how do they know it's real? I mean, you guys speak to that. Let's listen.
How convinced are you that this brooch originally was from Nicholas II?
Because my mommy told me it was. So therefore,
Well,
why would I doubt that?
do you have any documents, John, or any records or any firsthand knowledge that says for sure you're right and everyone else is wrong?
I will never go 100% on Houdini. We are always discovering things, so you never know when that photo of Houdini and Tsar Nicholas is going to show up.
I mean, I had to share that because the Larsens are the most charming couple.
Yeah.
They created the Magic Castle in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah, I used to go there. That's amazing.
Viewers
Yes.
right? And so they want to open a second one. So maybe the brooch could fund that. You'll find out tonight. But, that's the greatest provenance explanation I've heard in 4 seasons.
Wow.
His mom told him.
Or mommy, I think is what he said.
He's
which is
darling.
like-
And he was friends. His mom was best friends with Bess Houdini. The second episode tonight was interesting to me. I didn't realize how interesting till I got there. It's a love story, Melissa, of a couple who met, and for 60 years they collected arrowheads.
Wow.
I collect shoes. You might collect bags. This
Right.
woman loved the arrowhead. 250,000 arrowheads were collected, something you could never do today because it's illegal to collect these artifacts from public lands. So it's the greatest, probably the most comprehensive Native American historical collection you will ever find. We have it tonight, and they left it to their caregiver, who can make a fortune splitting it up. But can he, in his heart, break apart what they spent 60 years building?
That's amazing. What is something like that worth?
He tells me $1 million.
Wow.
We got big ones tonight with great stories.
Yeah, I mean, the brooch is really something. I mean,
it's diamonds and emeralds and rubies. It's a girl's best friend.
A czar and Harry Houdini. You can't beat that.
We'll
Jamie
figure
Colby,
it out.
Thank you so much.
That's at 9 and 9:30.
There you go. We'll watch. Thank you, John.
We are also awaiting action on the government shutdown, and we will go live to Capitol Hill, where the Senate is set to hold a key vote moments from now. Can lawmakers actually make a deal to get our government back up and running?